Welcome to E-commerce Marketing with the Pitbulls, where we catch up with craft brands to hear their story and learn how they're growing their e-commerce channel. Hi, I'm Andy.
And I'm Lindsay.
And today we are joined by Alicia Reisinger. She is the founder of Wax Buffalo. It is a pure soy candle company in the heart of the Midwest. And they are growing and just a beautiful brand and website and everything about this brand. So I'm very, very excited to kind of dive in and hear a little bit more about the brand and your story getting it started. So thank you for being with us, Alicia.
Well, thanks so much for asking me. I'm so happy to be here.
Definitely. So you said you're located in the heart of the Midwest, and I feel like right from your name, from the get-go, Wax Buffalo. Tell me a little bit more about specifically where you're at and kind of how that name kind of came about.
Sure. So yes, we are located in Lincoln, Nebraska. So right in the middle of the heart of the heartland. And we have two locations here in Lincoln. We have two stores, and then we just opened our first bar, which is part of our candle lab, which is actually what I'm sitting in right now, where you can choose your own vessel and you can have a little drinky. But yeah, Wax Buffalo, the whole thing actually started in my kitchen. I used to be a story producer, so I traveled the world doing documentary film work and getting people to tell scary, hard stories on camera. And I loved it. And after doing that for about 10 years, my husband and I decided to start a family. And my firstborn was born with a cleft lip and palate. And it just like changed everything. She had to do a lot of surgeries. There were tons of doctor's appointments. My entire life just basically became like fighting with insurance companies. And so that first year, everything really changed. And honestly, I started pouring candles because I think I just needed my brain back. I really loved the idea of, instead of telling stories on camera, telling stories with scent, and really like evoking emotion through fragrance. I just think scent is a very powerful thing. And so, I honestly just started pouring candles for myself in my kitchen. I would like pour myself a whiskey. I'd have a little drink and I would just start pouring candles, and I would pour candles until I started making too many mistakes because I was drinking too much whiskey. And I was like, it's probably time to be done. And I loved it so much that I started pouring, honestly, too many of them, and I started giving them away. And eventually a really good friend convinced me to try selling them. And that is how Wax Buffalo started.
That's awesome. I really love that. So one of the things that kind of stuck out to me as, I got to know your brand and dug in a little bit deeper, I was able to speak with somebody who works for your brand. Shout out to Brianne. And I was just really taken aback by how well you tell your story and how well your entire business really tells your story. I think that is kind of a good starting off point. It's clearly you can tell your background in producing stories and visually telling stories kind of shines through. But I'm curious if you can kind of give us your take on how you make sure to go from the brand story that you've generated so well, but make sure that kind of flows through the business and that everybody's, kind of speaking the same language.
Oh, well, one, thank you so much for saying that. That means a lot. And that's exciting for my heart to hear, because that does feel very important. I feel like when you start a company, there's like 22 of us now that work here, and sometimes it can get muddied up, right? And I feel like our team does do a really fabulous job of staying like kind of keeping things in a concise and beautiful, but staying with our roots. I said that very weird. I'm going to say that differently. I think our team does a really phenomenal job of telling our story, and it means a lot to me that is just as important to them as it is to me. I do think probably one of the reasons is because I am not formally trained in business. I was never I didn't go to business school. I went to, obviously, I'm more of a storyteller and an artist. And so as I built my company, I built it more like the way I would build a production company. The way that I would looked at the team is a lot of the ways that I just worked on set, because that's how I was trained. And so for anyone that's done any work like that, or if you've ever, watched a behind the scenes of a movie, to make something really work well, you all have to have bought into what you're doing, what you're creating. And you all know your very particular role. But I also think although there can be some really crazy ego on set, you honestly can't have too much ego, because you cannot make a film by yourself. And so all the way from director down to, your grip, everybody has a purpose. They know their purpose and they're dialed into that. And I think for our team, everyone knows that like we just can't function without each other. So everybody feels very important. We all learned how to pour candles here from the get-go. And so even just that therapy of like, what is it like to like pour a candle and what is it like to make something for someone else is pretty integral in like who we are here as well. So I think, yeah, I think maybe that's why. Maybe because I didn't know how to make it businessy, so I built it around a story and invited everybody into that same story. I think it's a great question, though.
That's really cool. It's inspiring. I know as we grow ourselves as an agency, we're kind of in that same boat. We're a 3-person shop, and kind of slowly growing and bring people on. I feel like it's nice to hear that idea that, hey, it doesn't have to be the right answer or like the optimal business solution. It's like, there's a lot of different ways to do it. So, as you're thinking, oh, do we need project management next? Or do we need, another technical, set of hands on the keyboards? Or, what's the way forward? I like that idea of just kind of like going with your gut and your background and your vision and how you want to build the business, kind of growing organically that way.
Thank you. I will tell you, and I think this is an interesting thing too, because sometimes like, I think our story that like we took $100 and now we're $1 million company, but we're in that kind of like weird transition where we're getting big enough that like we get a lot of advice of what we need. Like you brought up project managers. And I think like we actually had a consultant team come in a year ago, speak into the business. And because I feel kind of vulnerable about not being like a business person, I took their advice, bulked up on some roles within my company, and then realized it was probably a mistake. Like we didn't need that many humans yet. We didn't need those kind of like pathways or like even just like the tech that they recommended. And we kind of got ourselves in a little bit of trouble this year. Like post-COVID, people aren't buying. So I should say COVID, everyone was buying online. Once all the stores opened up, we started to see a real difference in the way people were purchasing our products. And so our numbers started to go down. A lot of small businesses have been going through that this year. I'm sure you've heard this story, right? And so now we're having to reevaluate and go, whoa. What if we went back to like the way we started? And like, I don't know if we need this big, project management system. Like, let's just go back to writing on Post-its for a while. Like there are some things we're starting to do. And so like, I don't know. I think that's really wise as you're like looking at your team too. We've all worked for companies where we're like, there's a few people that I think don't do anything here. And like, that's not anything you ever want in a small business. Right. And so, yeah, it's Definitely been learning for us for sure.
Awesome.
I'd love to ask, I just think it's always so fun to meet someone who did not come from business and then just jumped in and grew from there. I'd love to ask if there were any major surprises for you as you transitioned from the world of media to the world of business. Did anything really stick out to you as like, wow, I did not expect to have to think about this or to do this, and how you overcame those challenges?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think the number one thing that I had to learn, and I still am learning, is that like running a manufacturing and cost of goods like business is really different than like production, where you're really not like buying a bunch of stuff and then hoping you're going to sell that stuff and make a profit. I also think like, because I didn't come from a business background, learning how to hold inventory well, but not too much inventory is always hard. And so, I don't know, like with production, it's like you bid a job, they're going to pay that job, you rent the gear you need, all of that goes into it. And there's a budget, and you can create a budget for the type of business that I have. And there are people that are really good at it. I am not yet. And so, I think my biggest thing was realizing that I was holding too much inventory, that I'm a bit of a dreamer. So I was anticipating like, well, when Nordstrom calls and they want all these candles, I'll be ready. But I was putting us at risk in the meantime, holding on to too much that we needed to just move out. So yeah, I think that's probably my number one is learning that. Yeah, learning how to hold inventory well.
It's so interesting. I feel like that comes up all the time. We typically are more on the marketing side of the house. So we'll come in, we'll be looking at your ads or different things that you could be working on. And that's like a repeated story that keeps coming up, is that all of a sudden inventory management, you never think about it until all of a sudden it's important, whether it be, just the cash flow side of it, or even just, getting the items through a warehouse and being able to have it in place and have people know what needs to get shipped out at different times and things like that. I feel like that's one of those overlooked challenges that you don't really think about when you're going into starting up an e-commerce business.
100%. Yeah. It's like you buy small and then you realize you're buying too small. And then I feel like there's this, and then you jump too big. You're like, I no longer want to be getting shipments of like 100 jars. I think I'll get 10,000. And that was like the wrong move. And I think it's kind of comforting that there's a lot of us that do the exact same thing. Hopefully we'll just all listen to your podcast and stop
Well,
each
there
other.
you go. That's the real answer here. So tell me a little bit about that transition. You mentioned that e-commerce is becoming less or more people shopping in person.
Yeah.
How has that been, at the same time as you're growing? I'm sure you're at a point where, you want to be expanding via, a little bit more scalable channel as well. So I'm curious kind of how you're balancing those two pushes at the same time.
It's a really good question. And yeah, you're right. Right now we're seeing bigger numbers in our actual, like our in-person retail locations, as opposed to online, where obviously a couple of years ago, online was our biggest and most robust sales channel. It's interesting. And in a lot of ways, I feel like we're still trying to figure out how to get our buns back into that like e-commerce channel, and get our, just a few more eyeballs on our brand. We have a really great presence in our own community. And I would say even kind of in the whole Midwest, we're well known. I do think we did a few things with retail where we looked at the world and went, okay, we've got to pivot. We've got to act like the Candle Lab became something where it's like we're having a lot of humans come in and learn about us because they go to a party, or the small bar is now bringing humans in that maybe aren't even looking for candles, but then fall in love with us. And so kind of doing that cross promotion and learning new things in the retail world, I think we still have a lot to learn when it comes to e-commerce. Right now, we have our website. We spend very little on marketing, and when I say very little, I'm like less than 5,000 in any type of marketing channel for e-commerce. And so I think in 2024, that's where we'd like to like grow.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about. I love this idea of the bar, and we do a Friday toast where we kind of work through, everything that we do is remote, so it's an opportunity to say, hey, we're gonna cheers to the people that we worked with, even though we're remote, but have a little bit of that personal connection. I'm curious how that, you mentioned the bar, and you also mentioned, I heard in your story, sipping a whiskey while you're pouring your candles in your kitchen. How did that kind of way to personalize and bring people together? How did that kind of flow through your story?
It's a good question. Also, it does sound like I drink a lot, but
it's just a consistent brand message is all.
Oh my gosh, yeah. And I have 4 kids and I run a business, so sometimes I need it. Honestly, what it came from is it was kind of like my therapy at night. And so it was part of my story, right? And then as we grew the business, I wanted it to still feel the same way. And so we had all of these college students or mothers that would come in like late at night. We had really weird manufacturing hours because I wanted it to feel a little bit like how it felt for me, where it was like, I'm not working a 9 to 5. I have 4 kids. I have a kid with needs. And so it needs to look different. And so we created it differently. All that to say, they would bring in a couple bottles of wine. Everybody would pour candles and drink wine. And so we realized that that's what we were doing within our own company. And we loved that therapy. And that is why we opened the Candle Lab here at this location. And then we realized people were calling and being like, would it be okay if we bring, BYOB? Can we bring in a bottle of wine? We're like, yeah. And that was happening with every party, every booking. And so the little like business in me went, whoa, whoa, whoa. I think I can make a profit off of that. Instead of having them bring wine that they bought somewhere else, what if we create an atmosphere where it's wine and beer, and now we have like fancy cocktails at our other location. And so I think it was pretty organic the way it grew. It started right with a whiskey in the kitchen, and now like I'm pouring like an actual whiskey for someone at a bar that I now own, which is pretty rad. It's kind of a cool arc. Also, I am a terrible bartender, and we have amazing ones, but the one thing I did learn about bartending, which maybe you all know this, is that you as a person that tends to be a bit of an introvert and a little bit shy, you can't walk away from that bar. If somebody sits down and wants to chat with you for 3 hours, you're just like, okay, completely different, world and brain, and we're learning it, and it's been fun. It's been a good adventure.
That's great.
Yeah. I like that y'all do a happy hour. That's super fun.
Yeah.
We'll
Well,
Zoom.
I feel like it's such a cool way to, bring that sense of community, especially with a physical product. It's important to have that way of connecting over not just the product itself, but it's, really more about the people you're sharing it with and all of that. So that's great.
Absolutely. Yeah. And in the lab, everyone gets a chance to be a maker themselves. And I think they get a little addicted to the therapeutic nature of making candles in the way that we do. And so it becomes like very community oriented because we're all just in there together making stuff. And that feels great.
It's awesome.
I know you mentioned spending less than 5,000 on marketing. Are there any fun, interesting, out of the box kind of things that you all do, apart from the lab that really gets your name out there? Or when you were just starting, were there things that you tried out and worked well?
That's a great question. I'm really lucky because we're almost 10 years old. And so when I started, Instagram was like, it was working, it was like that classic before the algorithm. So we really grew through Instagram. I think our first 50 stores that we wholesale to just found us by dinking around on Instagram. So that's pretty rad. And that has changed now. We do a ton of pop-ups and collaborations. And so we work with a lot of makers all over the country, whether that's like creating a candle for them or just collaborating on a really cool idea, which I think helps cross-promote in a great way. It's a lot of, that's been a cool way to find new customers that also are like interested in a brand like ours because they're interested in a similar brand in maybe a different arena, right? We also throw a lot of parties. So I feel like our marketing in town is really strong because, like, for instance, we're throwing a huge German Christmas festival outside our front door, but we invited like 120 of our maker friends and restaurants and drinkies. Like it literally like blows up for an entire day. And last year we had close to 4,000 people come out for the party.
Oh, wow.
And then, and I don't think I even had fully thought this through, but I was like, oh, now you're all like that was our best December ever because they had all come to our store. They'd experienced it. They had a fun party with us and then they came back and bought Christmas presents in a different way. And so I don't even think I realized that was a new marketing arm for us, but now we're throwing our second one this year and it should be exciting. But yeah, kind of some stuff like that. We need to do more.
That sounds so fun.
Thanks.
As you continue to grow, are you looking to expand that kind of in community footprint and kind of grow, in person like that? Or are you looking to, expand geographically through e-commerce and ways like that, or both?
I think awesome question. This year, 2023, we called it hyper local. So everything we wanted to do was hyper local. We did our first postcard mailing ever. And we did it to like bring people to the market and to the candle lab and to try and help people understand like we're a little bit of everything now. And that's sometimes hard to communicate. So everything was hyper local for 2023. And I think looking into 2024, we would like to expand now the eyeballs across the country and even beyond. I think it's time. And I think like once we get a candle in someone's hand, they come back, they buy again. Our product, I don't know, our product speaks for itself. Like people fall in love with the glassware, they fall in love with the smells. All of our glassware is reusable. So that it's like, not only did they burn up their candle, but then they're like, drinking their smoothie or their whiskey out of our glasses, which I think in turn brings them back to our brand. But in 2024, I think our goal is to get more eyeballs on the online arena.
That's awesome. I'm curious, as you're doing that, it seems like everything is very hands-on, very, kind of brand story. How do you do that from an e-commerce perspective? Obviously your website is beautiful, but I'm curious if you have any other kind of techniques or methods in terms of packaging or kind of how you tell that brand story over distance.
I will say I don't know a little bit. I feel like we could be better at it. We try to do a lot of little things. Like we definitely do the Estee Lauder move where we sample out because we know if we can get a scent in your hand. So every box that goes out comes with either like a little tea light or a little something to bring you back, which I think is
nice.
A nice little strategy. Yeah. That was always her. I don't know if you've ever read anything about like the way she changed the cosmetics world. But it was like Lauder started the whole idea of sampling out and it blew up, right? And so we do try and do that. I think we're probably going to have to put some dollar bills in like some ads across social media. We worked with influencers in the beginning and it was really effective. I don't I think I get really scared about putting my dollar bills in other humans' hands. And so I'm really trying to just research, like, what does it look like to tap into a strong affiliate marketing program and see if we can build, through mini audiences and kind of like those smaller influence circles. Yeah, I mean, I do think like ultimately word of mouth is the most powerful thing, right? If we find somebody that falls in love with our brand, they'll tell other people about it. We just have to figure out how to do that well and get more people to talk about it, I guess. Yeah.
Tell me a little bit more. So it sounds like you kind of have a million things going on. You, like you mentioned, kind of the brand is there's a lot there. How do you kind of prioritize and figure out where you're going to be putting that investment, or where you kind of think through where's the right place to grow next?
It's a great question. I do think that looking at analytics is really filled with grace, right? Like there is a lot you can do with like a gut idea. And I do think our guts are powerful. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs, like the whole reason we're doing this is because our gut told us to take a risk on something, right? And I'm always so thankful for that, because sometimes there's really hard days where, it's a grind, and sometimes the days are beautiful and you're like, my gut was right. This was the right thing to do. But I do think really tapping into the analytics and seeing where people are spending their money and what's making sense. One of the things that we've realized is I thought our emails were the most powerful marketing tool, and it turns out it's actually our SMS, our text messages bring in a bigger buying audience. I think they're more loyal, their dollar spend is bigger with us. They're obviously choosing to communicate with us on their phone. I also think it's powerful because they can click through, they immediately can just buy whatever they're looking at, and it's like bloop, 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 and it's done. So it's easy mode as well. So I think investing a little bit more in our SMS marketing and then trying to really kind of funnel everything well. But I do think it's looking at the back end and saying, this is where we're seeing performance, and then investing in that.
That's great. Can you speak to kind of the technical side of that at all? Like how you, especially having such a strong in-person experience and then having the bar and then also having online, obviously, like how do you kind of stitch all that together? And do you have a, particular tool that you like to kind of look at this together in, or you just kind of, make it up as you go and figure it out from the different systems?
It's a little bit of both. We do really love Shopify. We work with Shopify, and they have some pretty good inventory management on their back end. They also have great analytics that we can pull, and so we can use it to compare what's happening online to what's happening in store and retail. But a lot of we use Emotive for our SMS, and that isn't talking to Shopify yet, but fingers crossed it will be. It's interesting because I do think that, and we use Fair for wholesale, and Fair just collaborated with Shopify. So interestingly, I do think Shopify is starting to tuck into we as small business owners are like, can you just make it easier for me? And they're doing it. So I do think that that's probably our biggest and most robust tool that we use to really track everything. I don't know, did I answer your question correctly? Is that what you were asking?
Yeah, no, it's exactly, because we've heard that. We have a few clients, I believe, that are using the Shopify POS, in person, as well as typically we're more online focused, and we tend to focus a lot on how we're marrying together Shopify data with Google Analytics data for some different breakdowns. But to your point, there's no one right answer. It's you've got your entire tech stack. Some of it's in person, some of it's in different websites, tools, and how you kind of combine all that data is a little bit of an art and a little bit of a science.
It is, and a tiny bit of a mess, but yes.
Yeah, exactly.
I love that you mentioned too that initially you thought email is definitely our strongest channel. And then when looking at the data, you're like, oh, okay, wow, SMS. So that's what's going on here. I feel like we have a lot of clients, and we just talk to a lot of people in general who are like, this is my business. I know it through and through. I know what works. I know the customer, and this is what's working. And then when looking at the data, especially if they hire us and we come check things out in an audit, we say, oh, actually, you may want to spend more time on this channel. Can you speak to kind of having to balance that feeling as a founder? Because I know so many are like, this is my baby and I know it. And then coming in and having to recommend some things to those types of founders, we find that they really struggle letting go of, well, maybe I wasn't 100% spot on here.
Yeah. Oh, that's super fair. One, I love that you all do that. And I think you are such a value add to founders and entrepreneurs, and even being able into a small business and analyze their back end and be able to speak truthfully without bias, like you are such a gift. It's awesome. Yeah, I do. Like, I do get that. And like, one of my easy stories is the fact that I think our best seller is our worst seller because it's my favorite candle. And so we have an absinthe candle that I think is literally the bee's knees. And it's like, we sell the least amount and I won't get rid of it. But if you ask me, I'd be like, oh yeah, that's the one everybody loves. 100%. And I do think like, I mean, I've been doing this for 9 years and it changes. Exactly. Like there was a time when our email was our strongest. I just wasn't going back in and checking if it was continuing to be our strongest. And so I think it's a little bit, on me as well to be like, I have to like, once something's true, it's not necessarily true forever. And today's snapshot is not the snapshot of our entire breadth of our company. And so really going in and being like, I have to trust the numbers, even though as an artist and like a founder, like I don't want to. I want to be the one that like knows my business the best. But it's such a good point that, and I do think there's like freedom in the numbers as well, because then it is like you can, I don't know, you can kind of relax into the fact that like, okay, I actually do think we should get rid of this thing that I created. It took me a long time to figure it out. I thought it was going to be amazing. It's not. The numbers are showing it's not. And so it's time to let that baby go. And it doesn't feel as much like a failure, like I'm taking something away that took a lot of work. It's that I'm being told this is not smart for our company, so let's not do it. Freedom.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Do you ever see that in terms of customer feedback? We talk about that a lot with founders too, that they really hold on to something and it isn't until all the customers are pretty much beating them over the head with, we do not want this, until they finally realize, maybe I should make a pivot. Was there any like surprising customer feedback that you've gotten in this journey?
I think one thing that we had to be like just smushed over the head for years with was that I really love a very classic, clean branding. As you can see, I mean, like even there's nothing on it. We don't have anything. And I love that. But it was causing a problem, like especially in wholesale land, where the wholesalers and the VMers and those that were merching our product did not love that no one could tell what the scent was without having to pick up the candle and look at it. We eventually put a sticker on the lid because it used to just be like, it was just on the back and I didn't want you to know. I wanted it to feel very clean, and it was a mistake, but it took me a long time to pivot. And even then Whole Foods convinced us to put a little sticker on the side of the candle too, so the customers could just turn it. And we're like, okay, fine, we'll do it. But I would say that was probably my hardest one. And I think on the flip side of that, and something I think like we also as like small businesses like can tend to lean into is like a customer that actually gives you bad feedback, but it's just one. And then you make this terrible pivot that you never should have made because you listened to one customer instead of your other like 10,000, and so that balance. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have any examples of that? I hear that story all the time too. And I feel like it's so easy to say, oh no, I'm making a huge mistake here. I better just be really proactive and change my whole system and everything I'm doing to satisfy this one person. Do you have any examples of that?
I would say we used to hear it a little bit in the way that we shipped out our candles. Like there was I think, I can't remember what it was. Oh, here's my example. Okay. So we had like we have these really cool boxes that we have our subscription boxes. And so the like candle nestles in, it's got a big white X. It's like the branding's really beautiful. And I love that. Like it shows up at your house and you're like, ooh, good packaging. But we just ship them out like that. We throw a label on the back because we don't want to put a box in a box. And we had 2 people push back on that were like, whoa, I got this as a gift for my girlfriend. And I don't like that there's a shipping label on the back. And we did have to like really like think through like, are we actually doing something wrong here? Is this the wrong choice? And we had to kind of go back into like, well, what's the morality of our company? Like, no, we don't want to put extra trash into the world. And just because 2 people said this, it's the only 2 people that have ever had feedback about not having a shipping label on a box. And I think we ended up like at one point having like a little checkbox where you could say you didn't want that if it was a gift to try and work around those 2 people. But then eventually we're like, you know what? I think we'll just do it. This is what our brain's going to do and it'll be okay. We don't need 2 boxes. So yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that, sticking to the guns and going back to the brand morality. I love that being kind of a compass when you run into that kind of feedback. Think back to the beginning and like why you started everything, and does it align with this? Because you can't please everybody, and there's always going to be some complaining people out there.
And I think you'll go a little crazy trying, right?
Yes.
Well, I like that it gives you a framework too, like having that, having very clearly articulated brand values, and then also having, like you said, the data and somewhere else. Like those are just two different ways that you can have a framework to make these decisions because it can be really anxiety producing. I think a lot of times where it's like, well, like what is the right answer? It's not necessarily a right or wrong answer for every business, and you have to make the answer for your business. But it's nice to have some framework that you can point to that when those questions come up, you've got somewhere to go. Whether it be, hey, let's look at the data and figure out is this really true or not, or like to your point of hey, no, we're not going to ship additional paper and plastic out into the world. So that's that.
Yeah, I love that. I just recently heard someone say, sorry, our little door is opening. That's our dinger to tell everyone to go back. How are you? I just recently heard someone say that there are 12 good answers, right? There are 12 yeses or 10 yeses, whatever you want it to be. And you have to pick the yes that was right for you and that sits the best in your gut. And I think that's absolutely true for a company as well, right? And exactly what you were just saying. You go back to your values and go, this is the right yes for us. Of these 10 versions of yes, this is ours. So yeah. Sorry.
I'm curious too.
Or is it okay? Can you hear okay?
Yeah, it should work. I'm curious too if that becomes a kind of a superpower for Wax Buffalo specifically with your background. I'm sure you have probably more comfort than a lot of business people with kind of like working with the story and the art of it and understanding that it's there's 10 different ways to tell a story too, and it's let's pick the right way. It's not just one objective truth or one objective story. It's let's figure out how we're going to really get the point across. And I feel like you probably do that in your business as well.
I don't think I've ever connected that, but I think that's so true. I love that. I'm gonna go write that in my journal tonight. I do think that's very cool. I also think at Wax Buffalo is not my first entrepreneur journey. Like I owned a production company. I owned a children's theater for a while too, because I loved theater and thought that's what I wanted to do, but that's very hard. And so I only did that for a few years. But one of the things that would always happen in the children's theater was, you're working with parents and there would always be a parent. It's like, I don't like the way you did the costumes, or like, I don't love that my kid did the lead. And I would just write back and be like, oh my gosh, it sounds like maybe this isn't the right children's theater for you then. And every time they'd be like, oh, no, it's fine. No, it's fine. And there was just like this moment. I think that was such a realization to me of like, I don't have to bend if what we're doing is the correct thing, you have to bend when it's not. But but I've never connected it with the production, the storytelling. That was beautiful. Thanks for that gift. I like that a lot.
Awesome. Well, cool. This is, I feel like we've gotten through a lot and really learned a lot about your brand. I'm curious if you can tell us what's next for Wax Buffalo. What should we expect to see as we continue to watch?
Right. It's a great question. It's an interesting question this year. I think I alluded to it a little bit that like, I think for the first few years, we thought Wax Buffalo I wanted Wax Buffalo to blow up. I thought success was like, everyone knows who we are and we're making millions of dollars and we're, like I said, in Nordstrom. And the more that I have really touched those bigger box brands, and even we've had some bids that have gone out, or like we've had some touch points. Interestingly, in the next year, we're not looking to grow big that way. We're actually looking to get a little more nimble and a little more like feisty, like we were the first couple years. And I think like we've talked about really growing online. I think finding our niche and telling our story in that way, as opposed to being like we want to be the next candle in Target. I don't think we want that. We actually really love the way that our company works and the way that we can tuck in at night and drink a glass of wine together and pour candles. And in jumping into a big box store, we know that we would lose that somehow. We would lose it. And so as a team, we got together and decided like, no, let's go back a little bit, which feels weird, right? It feels weird to be as a company, be like, I think we're going to take a step this way instead of this way. But I'm actually really freaking excited about it. Like, I think it's going to allow us to like dream a little bit differently, because you can dream in smaller and more like expensive glass. So even just like our customer experience will be exciting, because we're not looking at something like, how do we make 40,000 of these? We're looking at like, how do we make 5 of these and sell 5,000 and sell them well? So I know that's a weird answer, but I think the future actually might look a little bit more like the past. And that gets me really excited.
That's beautiful. I feel like that's a storyline actually we're hearing more and more of, I think, as people are getting a little burned out on this like grow at all cost kind of thing. And it's, like, hey, let's build a business that actually works for our lifestyle and gives us some of the things that we wanted to get out of it in the first place. So that's really cool.
We want more grace and breadth and balance and travel and fancy drinks, right? And so
Exactly.
yeah.
You don't have to be the best candle in every Target everywhere. You can be the best candle, in the heart of the Midwest.
Yes, I like that.
I love it. Awesome. Well, can you let our audience know where they can find you and what they should expect when they get there?
Yes, I would love to do that. So you can shop us on waxbuffalo.com. We're on all the social medias. So you can interact with us there. And we're small enough that it's still like me in the back of Instagram writing you. And the two besties that help me support that. So hit us up on the socials or waxbuffalo.com. And then, of course, both of our locations are in Lincoln, Nebraska. So if you're ever traveling through, stop in, make a candle with us, have a drinky. We'd love it.
Great.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me. This has been such a fun conversation. I really enjoyed both of you so much.
Awesome. Well, thank you for being with us. The enjoyment is definitely mutual.
Thanks.
Lindsay, would you see us out?
Yeah, Alicia, thank you so much for being with us today. We really enjoyed it. And thank you to those watching and listening to Ecomm Marketing with the Pitbulls. Remember to subscribe to get all of our podcasts and YouTube videos as soon as they're released. And if you're finding this show valuable, we'd also really appreciate a like on YouTube or a review on your favorite podcast player. And we will see you all next time.
It's Andy. I'm here with Percy, the original PPC Pitbull. Thanks for checking us out today. If you're ready to take the next step in your digital marketing journey, come on over to ppcpitbulls.com and book a free strategy session. We'll take a few minutes to get to know you and your brand, and I promise you'll leave with actionable insights that you can implement today. Working together, we're going to get you on the right track towards reaching your unique e-commerce goals.